I stood at the end of the table, my hand still resting on the tray of cupcakes I'd baked from scratch. No one looked up. Not my son, not his wife, not even the grandchildren I used to rock to sleep. A single paper plate sat at my place, half a plastic fork sticking out like an afterthought. "We're doing small birthdays now," Lindsay had said, already laughing at something on her phone. Small. After sewing his Halloween costumes by hand, after putting off my own surgeries to pay their mortgage, after 66 years of giving, this was all I was worth. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. The smell of rosemary chicken and baked yams hit Caroline Hayes before the door fully opened. She stood for a moment on the tiled porch of her son's Phoenix home, the early evening sun casting long shadows across the gravel-lined lawn. Through the open door, voices rose and fell, laughter, clinking glassware, the high-pitched squeal of children chasing each other through the hall. Eric appeared in the doorway, still tucking in his shirt. "Hey, Ma. You made it." "I did." Caroline held out a small bakery box tied with twine. "Peach cobbler, from Ruth's." He took it with one hand and turned his head. "Dana." "Mom brought cobbler." From deeper in the house, Dana's voice floated back. "Hope she didn't expect us to save room." Caroline stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind her. The air conditioning was running too cold, as usual, and Dana's lemon and eucalyptus candles overwhelmed the natural warmth of the food. The dining table was already set, glinting crystal water glasses, linen napkins folded into fans, gold-rimmed plates gleaming beneath the chandelier. Except for one place setting. On the far end, next to a stack of napkins and the drink station, sat a lone, flimsy paper plate. Pale blue, dollar store floral trim. Fork tucked underneath like a consolation prize. Dana strolled in, heels clicking across the marble tile. She had her phone in one hand, a wine glass in the other, and a smirk that didn't even try to hide itself. She walked straight to the paper plate and lifted it theatrically. "Here we go," she chirped. "Special setting for the birthday girl." Her grin widened as she handed the plate to Caroline. "Can't be wasting the china on you, huh?" Eric laughed from behind the kitchen island. "Yeah, you know how fragile that stuff is. One slip and poof, gone." He snapped his fingers and took a swig of beer. The chuckles that followed were uneven, scattered. Caroline recognized the polite discomfort in them. Cousins, in-laws, even her own niece avoiding eye contact as they focused a little too hard on their drinks. One of the grandchildren whispered something to his sister. The girl glanced at Caroline, then quickly away. Caroline held the paper plate in both hands. It was so thin she could see the veins of her palms through it. She didn't say a word. "Come sit," Dana said, already turning back toward the kitchen. "We're doing a serve-yourself thing tonight. More casual." Caroline took the empty seat next to the drink station, setting the plate down without unfolding the napkin. Her purse rested at her feet. She glanced at the table. Shining silverware, fresh-cut tulips in a slender vase, name cards in curling gold ink. Everyone else was already halfway through dinner. No one had waited. "Red or white?" Eric asked, pouring himself another glass of Pinot. "I'll have water," she replied evenly. He shrugged. "Suit yourself." Dana returned and placed a wine glass in front of her anyway. "In case you change your mind." Caroline didn't touch it. From across the room, someone raised a toast, her nephew Mark trying to cut through the tension. "To Caroline, 65 years young." "Happy birthday," someone else echoed. Caroline forced a small smile, nodding in thanks. But her eyes didn't match the curve of her lips. They remained distant, focused. She reached into her purse under the table just for a moment, her fingers brushing the envelope tucked neatly beside her wallet. Thick. Official. Sealed. She didn't pull it out. Not yet. Her phone buzzed in her lap. She turned it over, shielding the screen with her hand. Ruth, how's your birthday? Caroline stared at the message, then tapped out a reply. Caroline, paper plate. 3 dots flickered as Ruth typed, but Caroline had already locked her phone and slipped it away. She looked back at the table, her family laughing around candlelight, wine sloshing in tall glasses, voices rising louder with each drink poured. Her plate remained untouched, its pastel edge warping slightly from the heat of the roasted yams beside it. Her fingers traced the rim once, then withdrew. She sat straighter in her chair. Eyes cool, spine unbending. She didn't know it yet, but they had given her the only gift she needed that night. Permission. And across the table, Eric was still laughing when Dana leaned over and whispered something in his ear. He looked up suddenly, directly at Caroline. His smile faltered. The sound of the garage door humming shut was the only noise in Caroline's house. No laughter, no glass clinking, no forced birthday toasts. Just the low mechanical whir fading into silence and the soft click of her sensible heels on the tiled floor. She walked straight to her office without turning on a single light. The desert evening outside was still clinging to heat, casting a burnt orange glow across the blinds. In the dusk-colored stillness, everything in her home remained exactly where she left it. Precisely, deliberately, unlike the chaos of Eric's glossy, over-decorated house. She knelt beside the filing cabinet, the old one tucked under her desk, the one even the movers didn't bother with when she downsized after retirement. Its edges were scratched and the lock was stiff. She paused with her hand on the handle, pressing her palm flat against the cold metal for a long moment. Then she pulled open the drawer with one steady motion. Folders lined up like soldiers, green tabs labeled in her sharp accountant's handwriting. Utilities, medical, car title. Each one in order, each one exactly where she remembered putting it. She reached for the third file from the back. Property documents. The folder was thick, heavier than the others. She placed it gently on the desk and opened it, flipping past decades of records with careful fingers. Closing statements, tax receipts, refi paperwork from 1999, her mortgage payoff letter from 2011, yellowing at the edges. The smell of old ink and crisp paper filled the room, oddly comforting. Then she reached the page she'd been avoiding for years. Quitclaim deed. Co-ownership. Caroline Hayes. Eric Hayes. Her name. His name. Tied together in black and white, the way it had been since the month her husband died, and everyone told her it was the smart move to protect the house. Eric had signed without hesitation back then, still riding high off his MBA, said it would keep things in the family. Now he was talking about remodels. Now Dana was handing her paper plates. Caroline sat back slowly in her desk chair, the paper resting in her lap. The air conditioning kicked on overhead, making the pages flutter slightly. Her hands didn't move. The phone rang. Ruth. She didn't even wait for a greeting. Caroline. Caroline didn't speak, but she didn't hang up either. You've had enough, Ruth said, voice low, sure. And you know it. Caroline stared down at the deed, her fingers tightened around the edge. Ruth waited on the other end. No pressure, just presence. The way she always was. Caroline finally answered. I know. The word hung in the air like a final answer. She set the deed on the desk and opened her laptop, pulling up her financial spreadsheet. Years of careful saving. No splurges, no vacations. She knew exactly what she had, to the penny. She'd always known. She scrolled past tabs. Emergency fund, healthcare, estate, and finally, legal. She clicked it open. Empty. But not for long. Caroline reached for a fresh yellow legal pad. Wrote one name at the top in clean block letters. Thomas Reed, real estate attorney, then underlined it twice. Another tap of her fingers on the desk. She pulled out a pen, uncapped it, and signed the bottom of the deed, just above Eric's name, as if daring it to challenge her. Her cell buzzed once more. Ruth. Tomorrow morning. Cafe. 9 a.m. Caroline didn't reply. She slipped the deed back into the folder, but this time she placed the tab at the front of the drawer. Then she locked the cabinet, stood slowly, and turned toward the kitchen, her eyes landing briefly on the untouched peach cobbler box still sitting on the counter. No candle, no slice, no celebration. But tonight, she had what mattered more: intent. And the last thing she did before switching off the office light was place her keyring on the table beside her planner. The extra key, the one Eric thought still mattered, gleamed in the dark. The bakery cafe smelled like cinnamon, butter, and warm vanilla glaze. It always did. Ruth's place had that kind of comfort built into the walls. Sunlight filtering through the front window, Billie Holiday playing low on the speakers, and the faint hum of the espresso machine behind the counter. Caroline slipped into her usual corner booth without needing to order. Ruth had already poured the coffee. "She said what?" Ruth asked, eyes widening. Caroline set her handbag gently on the seat beside her and folded her hands over a crisp manila folder. "She handed me a paper plate, said they didn't want to waste the china." Ruth, standing behind the counter in her flour-dusted apron, froze for a beat. Then she picked up the metal mixing spoon from the counter and slammed it against the stainless steel prep table. The clang echoed through the cafe. A customer near the front jumped slightly and glanced over before returning to his laptop. "Serve them dessert they'll choke on," Ruth said, voice low and fierce. Caroline raised an eyebrow but didn't smile. She simply opened the folder and slid it across the table. Ruth leaned in. Her hands smelled like almond paste and orange zest, and she used one to flip through the paperwork. Balance sheets, savings account statements, CD maturity dates, a typed spreadsheet that looked like it belonged to a financial planner, not a retired accountant. "You've been preparing for this," Ruth muttered. "I never stopped." "You're loaded." "I'm ready." Ruth grinned. "Even better." Caroline took a sip of the coffee Ruth had poured. It was just right, black, hot, no sugar, no cream. She let the bitterness settle on her tongue. "You sure about Reed?" Ruth asked. "He handled my father's probate. He's slow-moving but sharp. Doesn't get distracted." Ruth nodded, then glanced toward the front window. Outside, the sun was already burning high over the desert pavement, casting warbling mirages along the parked cars. Caroline pulled out her phone and opened Instagram. She scrolled with her thumb, slow and unblinking, until she found it. Dana's post from last night. "Mrs. Hayes, AZ, family dinner was perfect tonight. Blessed. Modern family." The photos showed the gold-rimmed table, candlelight glowing, plates perfectly arranged, except for one. The paper plate was cropped out. Caroline looked closer. Dana's hand was in the frame, holding a wine glass. Eric was mid-laugh. Even the children were posed like extras on a network sitcom. Ruth leaned over the table to peek. "She posted that?" Caroline didn't respond. She just zoomed in with 2 fingers. A tiny smudge in the background, her shoulder, just visible at the edge of the frame. Clipped, cropped, erased. "She's proud of it," Ruth said, shaking her head. "Like she did you a favor." Caroline locked the phone and placed it face down on the table. "I think I'm ready for Thomas," she said calmly. Ruth didn't speak right away. She returned to the prep counter, grabbed a notepad from beside the flour bin, and walked back to the booth. She tore off the top sheet and slid it next to Caroline's folder. "Here, dessert menu for next week." Caroline scanned it. Lemon bars, almond torte, chocolate fudge layer cake, pecan thumbprints. "What's this for?" she asked. Ruth winked. You're gonna need something sweet to serve with the paperwork. Caroline folded the menu in half and tucked it into her purse. She looked back out the cafe window, toward the wide, sun-bleached street stretching past desert palms and stucco walls. "I'm not angry," she said softly. "Not really." Ruth didn't argue, just gave a small nod. Caroline stood slowly, tucking the folder under her arm. Her coffee was half finished. She left it that way. As she reached the door, her phone buzzed again in her purse. A new message from Dana, just a link this time. Zillow.com. 5 ways to remodel your parents' home without breaking the bank. Caroline didn't click it. She looked up at the morning sun slicing across the sidewalk and slipped on her sunglasses. The bell over the cafe door jingled as she stepped outside. Thomas Reed's office smelled faintly of leather and lemon oil, orderly, clean, and slow with time. The walls were lined with old law books, their spines uncracked but proudly displayed. Framed diplomas and local chamber awards dotted the wood-paneled wall behind his desk. A glass bowl of Werther's Originals sat untouched near a crystal paperweight. Everything in the room whispered, "Trust me." Caroline sat in the stiff leather chair across from him, her manila folder resting on her lap. Her purse was zipped, her spine straight, her expression unreadable. Thomas adjusted his reading glasses and flipped through the papers she'd brought. "It's all in order," he said quietly. "The deed was never modified after your husband passed, just transferred into joint ownership with Eric. No encumbrances, no secondary liens. Clean title." Caroline gave a single nod. "I'll draw up a quitclaim. No need for court. It's your house. Always was." He spoke slowly, without condescension, like a man used to older clients who didn't like to be rushed. But he wasn't underestimating her. Caroline could see that in his eyes. She liked that about Thomas. He'd always known when to speak and when to listen. He slid a fresh sheet of paper in front of her. Legal header, deed number, parcel ID, in thick type, quit claim deed, full transfer of interest grantor Eric Hayes, grantee Caroline Hayes. Thomas tapped his pen on the signature line. "Once you sign this, we file with the county. His name's off. He'll have no legal claim." Caroline didn't reach for the pen right away. She stared at the line beneath her son's name for a full beat, her jaw tight. Thomas folded his hands and waited. Then, without fanfare, she took the pen, tested it once on a scratch pad, and signed in one clean, deliberate motion. No shaking, no hesitation. Thomas exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath without knowing it. "That's that," he said, nodding once. "I want it filed today," Caroline said. He smiled faintly. "I figured. I called ahead." An hour later, they stepped into the beige linoleum calm of the Maricopa County Recorder's office, a place built for bureaucracy and little else. The air smelled faintly of toner and desert dust tracked in from the parking lot. A young mother wrangled a toddler near the number kiosk. A bored-looking man filled out a marriage license at the next counter. Carolyn clutched the envelope under one arm. Thomas handed over the forms at the service window like a surgeon passing off a scalpel. Precise, practiced. Maria Lopez, the clerk behind the plexiglass divider, adjusted her glasses and blinked down at the document. Her gaze flicked to Caroline. "You used to come in every year with tax assessments," she said, a note of familiarity in her voice. "I remember your handwriting." Caroline gave a small nod. "Still mine." Maria looked again at the form, then gave a faint, knowing smile. With a heavy chunk, the official county stamp came down. Red ink bleeding across the page. Sharp-edged and final. Filed. Stamped. Done. Maria slid the documents back through the window. "You're good, Ms. Hayes. You're the sole owner now." Caroline tucked the newly stamped deed into her purse without a word. Her hand rested there for a moment, not out of hesitation, but ownership. When she stepped outside, The desert sun hit her full in the face. Heat shimmered above the parking lot, baking the asphalt until the yellow lines blurred at the edges. Ruth was waiting near a shaded bench, holding 2 iced coffees and a brown paper bag. Caroline walked toward her. Ruth stood, handed her a drink, and without asking, pulled her into a hug. Carolyn didn't resist. It wasn't a tight hug. Just firm, steady. The kind that said, "I was here before, and I'll be here after." Ruth pulled back, eyes crinkling. "He has no idea, does he?" Caroline shook her head. "Not a clue." Ruth handed her the bag. Inside, nestled in wax paper, was a single slice of dark chocolate cake with raspberry glaze. "For your next family dinner," she said dryly. Caroline took it, but her gaze remained fixed on the cloudless blue sky above the low desert hills, the sun hanging like a quiet threat. Her phone buzzed in her bag. A text preview blinked across the screen. "Eric. Just got a quote from the contractor. Gonna start demo in a couple weeks." She didn't open it. Not yet. The Hayes dining room looked like a showroom again. Fresh-cut peonies in a low ceramic vase, tall taper candles flickering in polished brass holders, and every plate set just so. Not a napkin out of place. Dana had even replaced the old rug with something that looked like it belonged in a restoration hardware catalog. Sunday dinner was family tradition, Eric had texted. "Hope you're up for meatloaf and blueprints." Caroline had RSVP'd with a simple, "okay." Now, she sat at the same table where the paper plate had been handed to her less than a week ago, only this time, the gold-trimmed china had made a miraculous reappearance. Dana passed out cloth napkins like she was hosting a benefit gala. Across from her, Eric stood near the fireplace mantel with a whiskey glass in hand, playing the part of the charming patriarch in the making. He tapped the rim of his glass and smiled around the room. "So," he announced, "I've been thinking. It's time we really invest in the family property. The market's climbing, and it'd be stupid not to act." Caroline lifted her water glass and took a slow sip. No one noticed. Dana beamed beside him, practically vibrating with anticipation. "We've got a designer coming out next week. Kitchen expansion, full bath remodel. We're talking marble counters, exposed beams, open concept all the way. It's going to be stunning." Ruth, seated 2 chairs down from Caroline, tilted her head and arched one eyebrow, but said nothing. Caroline glanced down at her phone under the table. The screen lit up silently. "Ruth, check your messages." Caroline unlocked her phone and opened the photo attachment. It was a clean shot of the stamped deed. Maria Lopez's red ink visible in the corner like a seal of judgment. Her name, alone, untouched, legal. Caroline let the image sit on the screen a moment. Her thumb hovered over it. Then she locked the phone and slid it back into her purse. Across the table, Dana had unrolled a large sheet of paper and was smoothing it down over the centerpiece. "Ignore the coffee stain. Eric got too excited at breakfast," she said with a laugh. The blueprint showed a detailed floor plan with changes marked in blue ink. French doors in the back, an island that doubled as a breakfast bar, his and hers sinks upstairs. "I told him we're going full HGTV on this place," Dana said brightly. "It's practically begging for it." Caroline looked down at the blueprints without a word. She could see the bedroom where she'd once kept her late husband's reading chair, the kitchen where she had prepared every Thanksgiving meal for 30 years, the linen closet she'd organized by season and scent. She didn't flinch. "Of course," Eric said, circling around the table again. "None of this matters if the old lady insists on squatting there forever." A few scattered chuckles. Dana giggled behind her wine glass. "She'll be gone before we even fix the place up," Eric added, sipping his drink. "Right, Ma?" Caroline set her water down carefully, the glass landing on the coaster without a sound. Her eyes flicked up and met Eric's across the candlelit table. There was something unreadable in her face, something cool and unbothered. "I'm still deciding," she said softly. Eric grinned like she'd made a joke. "Well, let us know when you're ready to stop playing house." Beside her, Ruth's phone buzzed. She glanced down, then subtly nudged her phone toward Caroline under the table. "Ruth. His name's not even on the mortgage anymore. That smirk is gonna melt." Caroline didn't look. Instead, she reached for the dinner roll basket, placed one on her plate, and broke it cleanly in half. Her hands were steady, measured. Dana raised her wine glass again. "To new beginnings," she toasted. Everyone echoed her. Everyone but Ruth and Caroline. Caroline didn't move. She looked at the blueprint on the table one last time, then folded her napkin and placed it gently beside her plate. Then, in a tone so even it was almost serene, she said, "Some beginnings cost more than you think." Eric blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" Caroline smiled faintly. "Oh," she said, "you'll see." The keys clinked against each other in Caroline's palm, two older brass ones for the front and back doors, a smaller silver one for the mailbox, and now, a fourth, new, cut the day before at a kiosk in the hardware store near the cafe. It gleamed under the kitchen light as she slid it onto her ring, between her Honda key and the one for her filing cabinet. When she let it fall, it landed with a solid click that echoed faintly through her quiet, empty house. Her house. No signatures left to gather, no filings to chase, no sons left to ask permission from. The sun had already begun to dip behind the edge of the desert, casting a warm amber glow through the west-facing windows. The air inside was still and cool, preserved by the insulation she'd insisted on upgrading years ago, long before Eric ever took an interest in investing. She walked slowly through the hallway, her footsteps silent on the worn wood floors. With every step, something inside her softened, something clenched so tightly for so long it had started to feel like part of her posture. She passed the framed family photos on the wall. None were recent. Most were yellowed or crooked in their frames. One showed Eric in his high school graduation gown, his hair messier than she remembered, and his smile so young it hurt. Another was her wedding photo, black and white, her dress simple, her husband's hand steady around her waist. Neither photo moved her now. When she entered the kitchen, she paused. The granite countertop was cold to the touch, but smooth beneath her fingertips. She ran her hand across it slowly, the way someone might trace the edges of an heirloom or a scar. She turned to face the dining area. The table still had a small stack of mail she hadn't sorted, and a candle that had burned all the way down to the wick. But it was hers, every inch of it. Bought, maintained, protected. "I want a picture," Ruth said from behind her, raising her phone. Caroline turned. "Of what?" "Your victory face." Caroline arched a brow. "You think I have one?" "You do now." Ruth snapped the shot before she could object. "Don't worry, it's not going online." "Thank God." Ruth lowered the phone and looked around the room. "Feels different, doesn't it?" Caroline didn't answer right away. She turned back to the window, watching the light sink below the stucco walls of her backyard. A hummingbird flitted past the feeder. The quiet was so full, it buzzed. Then her phone vibrated on the counter. "Eric. Voicemail 1." She didn't move. Ruth took a step closer. "You gonna listen to it?" Caroline picked up the phone and tapped the screen. Eric's voice filled the kitchen, casual and upbeat, like they'd just had a warm chat over coffee. "Hey Ma, just wanted to give you a heads up. We're meeting with the contractor on Friday. Dana's thinking about knocking out the guest bathroom wall to open up the hallway. Real modern flow, you know. Anyway, you'll probably want to be out by the end of next week so they can demo without hassle. We'll cover the movers." "Shouldn't be a big deal." The message ended with a cheery, "Love you." Caroline stared at the phone for a long moment. then tapped delete. No reply. No hesitation. Ruth watched her carefully. Still think you're not angry? Caroline set the phone down and opened the fridge. I think I'm something better. She pulled out a chilled bottle of tea and cracked the cap. The sound was sharp. Final. Ruth smiled. You always were. A breeze stirred outside, rustling the palm fronds along the back wall. Caroline walked to the patio door, unlocked it, and stepped out into the evening air. The desert sky had turned lavender. A single star blinked in the fading light. She leaned on the railing, her fingers wrapped around the cool metal, and exhaled. Behind her, the phone buzzed again. Eric. Text. Contractor says demo's gonna move fast. Need access by Thursday. Then another. Eric. You still planning to stay there this week? Caroline didn't turn around. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her new house key, and turned it slowly between her fingers like a coin. The spin cycle thrummed gently in the laundry room, a slow, steady rhythm that matched the desert wind pushing through the lemon tree outside. Caroline sat on the small wooden stool next to the dryer, folding warm towels with practiced efficiency. Fold, smooth, stack, repeat. The scent of fresh linen and lavender detergent filled the air, grounding her in a way that social media never could. Her phone was propped on the counter beside her. The screen glowed with Instagram. She scrolled without blinking. Mrs. Hayes AZ had posted again. A photo of the front of the house taken just after sunrise, golden light hitting the white stucco like a soft filter. The caption read, So grateful for our beautiful home. Shach Hayes House. Trust modern family. Shach's blessed. Caroline studied the photo for a moment. Dana had angled the shot to include the new succulents she'd planted in the front garden bed, the ones Caroline had trimmed and watered for years. Her hydrangeas were gone. Dug up and tossed, she assumed. She zoomed in slightly. There, tucked in the corner of the frame, was Caroline's mailbox, her name still on it. She locked the screen, folded another towel. The phone buzzed again. When she unlocked it, her heart did not so much as stir. Linda Sue, 45. So happy for you guys. You deserve it. Hausch Mason, AZ Realty. Let us know when you're ready to list. Markets, Aisha Mimi Bakes, y'all are house goals. She scrolled past all of it. The hashtags, the emojis, the curated lie. Ruth's text came through next. Ruth. They're about to choke on those emojis. Caroline finally smiled. Small, private. She reached behind her and pulled the last envelope from a stack on the dryer. Cream-colored, certified, neatly labeled in Thomas's clean legal print. She slipped it into her canvas tote and patted the flap shut. The first notice was going out today. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt ready. 20 minutes later, the envelope passed from her hands into the grip of a uniformed process server, broad-shouldered, calm-eyed, professional. This the right address? He asked, holding up the slip. Caroline nodded. It's the only one. He tipped his hat and headed toward Eric and Dana's front door without another word. Caroline didn't linger. She got back into her car, adjusted the AC vents, and drove home. Back inside her laundry room, the dryer buzzed. She opened the door and reached in. The heat spilled out in waves, soft and steady, wrapping around her wrists and forearms as she gathered a warm pile of pillowcases into her arms. Cotton against skin. Ordinary. Grounding. She folded without rush. The sun dipped lower through the blinds, cutting angled shadows across the clean tile floor. The phone rang again. She didn't need to look to know the caller. Voicemail. She didn't play it. Instead, she turned the phone off completely and placed it in the drawer beside her sewing supplies, next to the thimbles, old spools of thread, and a fabric tape measure that had belonged to her mother. From the living room came the faint sound of her old wall clock ticking, the only noise in the whole house. She paused, listened, folded one more towel. Then she reached into the laundry basket and pulled out the shirt she'd worn to the last Sunday dinner, the one that didn't make it into Dana's photo. It still smelled faintly of roasted rosemary chicken and lemon candles. She smoothed the fabric across her lap and began folding it carefully, lining up the seams like she used to when Eric was still in high school. Outside, a car engine sputtered to life, a door slammed, then yelling, muffled, distant. Caroline didn't react. She placed the folded shirt neatly on top of the stack, then picked up another. The knock on the door wasn't timid. It was a series of sharp, insistent thuds, angry, impatient, entitled. Carolyn didn't flinch. She stirred a splash of cream into her coffee and gave it a slow swirl as the knocking came again, louder. Ruth stood at the counter, slicing a lemon tart she'd brought over that morning. "You want me to get that?" she asked dryly. "No," Caroline said. "Let him come in." The third knock was followed by the door flinging open so hard it bounced off the stopper. Eric stormed into the kitchen, his sneakers squeaking on the tile, a crumpled eviction notice balled up in one fist like it was radioactive. Dana was right behind him, her sunglasses pushed up on her head, her eyes wide with fury. "Are you out of your mind?" she snapped, brandishing her own copy, the paper flapping like a flag of grievance. Caroline didn't even look up. She took a slow sip of her coffee and set the mug down gently on the quart coaster. "This is a mistake," Dana hissed, stepping forward. "Some clerical error. Some crossed wire in the county records. You need to fix this." "It's not a mistake," Caroline replied. Eric was pacing now, a vein throbbing visibly in his neck. "You can't do this," he said, waving the notice like it might undo itself. "You don't have the authority." "She does," Ruth interrupted, turning from the counter. She wiped her hands on a striped dish towel and leaned back against the sink with the quiet satisfaction of someone watching a long-played checkmate settle into its final move. "She already did," Ruth added. Eric stopped mid-step, eyes darting from Ruth to Caroline. "You're siding with her?" "I'm standing in her kitchen," Ruth said, drinking her coffee, watching her eat her lemon tart. Take a wild guess. Dana's hand trembled as she stared down at the notice again. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into the cheap copy paper. "This isn't happening," she muttered. "This can't be real." "It's legal," Caroline said calmly. "Thomas filed it. Maria stamped it. My name is the only one on the deed. You can verify it with the county." Eric stared at her like he didn't recognize her. Like the woman in front of him wasn't the same mother who'd packed his school lunches, mailed him rent checks during his first year in grad school, and stood quietly in the back row at his wedding. "You said it was still the family house," he whispered, incredulous. "You told me we were keeping it." "I never told you what you wanted to hear," she replied. "You just stopped listening." Dana suddenly let out a shriek and tore the notice down the middle. "This isn't happening," she screamed, ripping it again and again until the pieces floated to the floor like dry leaves. Caroline didn't move. "You think this makes you the hero?" Eric snapped, taking a step closer. "You think humiliating us is going to, what? Teach us a lesson?" "I'm not interested in lessons," Caroline said evenly. "I'm interested in boundaries." Behind her, the kettle started to whistle. Ruth turned off the burner and poured fresh water into a teacup like they weren't watching a meltdown happen 6 feet away. Eric's face flushed red, his voice breaking. "This is our house." "No," Caroline said softly. "This was my home, until you treated it like a blueprint." A long silence followed. Even Dana had nothing to say. The torn scraps of the eviction notice lay in a messy pile at her feet, as if the law could be shredded like junk mail. Caroline reached down, picked up her mug, and walked toward the window. The desert sun was blinding white on the pavement outside. A mourning dove perched on the backyard fence, unbothered. Eric was breathing hard. Dana was frozen in place. "You have 30 days," Caroline said quietly, not turning around. The silence cracked. "I'm calling a lawyer," Eric barked. "Good," Caroline replied. "I know a few." Caroline didn't bother cleaning up the scraps of the torn eviction notice. They still sat where Dana had dropped them, scattered like confetti for a celebration no one was invited to. She set her coffee down with quiet precision, walked back to the table, and pulled out the envelope she'd tucked into a drawer weeks ago. The one with the raised county seal and the heavy paper that made people sit up straighter without knowing why. Eric and Dana stood frozen, like bad actors who'd forgotten their lines. Caroline slid the contents onto the table: deed, affidavit, filing receipt, and smoothed the edges until everything lay square and aligned. "You wanted to talk legal," she said, looking up at them. "Let's talk," Eric scoffed. "This doesn't change anything." "It changes everything," Caroline said. "Your name is off the deed. The title is clean. I've had it recorded. It's final." Dana stepped forward, arms crossed. "You didn't notify us." "I wasn't required to," Caroline said. "You're not tenants. You're guests. Guests without a lease, without ownership, and without legal standing." "That's not fair," Eric exploded, slamming his hand on the table so hard the papers jumped. Caroline didn't flinch. "Fair?" she repeated, tilting her head. "You served me meatloaf and mockery for my birthday. You posted pictures of my home online and called it yours. And then you told me to vacate so you could start demolition." She held his gaze like a courtroom spotlight. "Tell me, Eric, which part of that was fair?" Dana turned to Ruth, as if hoping for an ally. "You're seriously okay with this?" Ruth was still at the counter, sipping her tea. She gave a dry laugh and said, "I brought the lemon tart, remember? That should tell you where I stand." Dana's voice went shrill. "We'll fight this. I'll call an attorney. We'll sue." Ruth smirked into her teacup. "Good luck." Eric grabbed the paperwork and flipped through it like he might find a typo that voided the whole thing. "You can't just erase me." "I didn't erase you," Caroline said. "I removed you. There's a difference." She reached across the table and tapped the line that bore her name alone: Caroline Hayes, sole owner. The ink was already starting to soften into the paper. Eric sat down suddenly, like gravity had doubled. Dana stayed standing, arms wrapped around herself, lips pressed into a white line. She looked less like a woman scorned and more like someone realizing the seatbelt light had just blinked on mid-flight, and the engine was sputtering. Silence swallowed the room. The kind of silence that wasn't empty, but full, brimming with everything unsaid and unavoidable. Caroline let it stretch. Ruth finally broke it, setting her cup down with a quiet clink. "You two should start packing." Eric looked up sharply. "You'd really evict your own son?" Caroline held his gaze. "I'd really defend what's mine." Dana's phone buzzed. She snatched it off the counter and read the screen. She looked up, pale now. "Eric?" The server came by again. Eric blinked. "What?" She showed him the message. Notification of second attempt to serve papers. No contact. Document left with notice. Attached was a photo. An envelope tucked into the frame of their front door. Eric's shoulders slumped. Dana looked like she might throw up. Caroline reached for her mug again and took a slow sip, the ceramic warm in her hand. She watched them both, silently, as if studying a painting that had finally come into focus. Dana took a step back, breathing hard. "You won't get away with this." Caroline's voice was quiet, but steady. "I already have." The front door creaked open again. The afternoon sun cut across the floor in a clean, perfect line. From outside, a voice called through the screen. "Ma'am, you Caroline Hayes?" Caroline turned toward the door. Yes? Sheriff's Department. Just here to post the notice per court order. Eric jumped up. Wait, wait. Court order? What are you? But Caroline was already walking to the door, her mug in hand. She opened it. Right on time, she said. Caroline sat in Thomas Reed's office again, the same seat as before, this time without the folder clutched in her lap. The air was thick with the scent of his lemonwood polish and aged legal leather, and the September light sliced through the blinds in sharp geometric lines across the carpet. Thomas leaned back in his chair, glasses perched on the bridge of his nose as he scanned a freshly printed copy of the cease and desist Eric's new attorney had emailed over that morning. He barely blinked. This is noise, he said, setting the paper down. No standing, no lease, no equitable interest, no statutory claim. It's a tantrum in legalese. Caroline didn't smile, but the tension in her shoulders loosened. Should I be worried? No, he said flatly. You should be knitting. She gave a soft half snort. That's what I had planned. He slid the cease and desist across the desk like it was a grocery store receipt. Let him waste his money. The court won't touch it. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down. Dana Hayes posted a story. Caroline unlocked the screen, already bracing for the temperature drop. It was a video this time. Dana in their car, windows up, red-faced, her voice a choked mess of mascara and fury. This is what happens when greedy family members stab you in the back, when your own mother-in-law tries to ruin your life. I hope she enjoys her little power trip, because karma's a bitch and we're coming for everything. The story ended with a smash of Dana's hand hitting the steering wheel, and a brief, blurry shot of Eric in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, jaw locked. Ruth's text popped up seconds later. Ruth. Did she just compare you to Voldemort, or am I imagining things? Caroline replied with a single thumbs-up emoji. That evening, the wind picked up. One of those sudden desert gusts that rattled the palm fronds and shook the old awning against the back patio. The sky outside had turned a bruised purple, the last sliver of light casting long shadows across the tiled floor of Caroline's living room. She sat in her armchair, ankles tucked under a wool throw, a soft basket of yarn at her side. The fire crackled low in the hearth, the scent of burning mesquite warming the room with memory. Her knitting needles clicked quietly, a slow, steady rhythm that made her feel like herself again, whole, settled. The TV was off. Her phone sat face down. No alerts, no calls. She counted stitches in her head. Purl, knit, purl. From the hallway, the clock chimed 8. The window rattled again as a stronger gust swept through the yard, rustling the bougainvillea against the stucco wall. But Caroline didn't flinch. She'd lived through bigger storms than this. Some of them had sat across from her at her own table, smiling with sharpened teeth. She picked up her tea, now lukewarm, and took a small sip. Another buzz from her phone. She let it ring out. She knew the sound of desperation by now. It had a very specific tone. Fast, repetitive, uncertain of itself. She looked over at the small legal envelope resting on the coffee table. Eric Hayes v. Caroline Hayes scratched across the top in messy blue pen. Thomas had underlined the court's response. Motion denied. No legal claim. Dismissed with prejudice. Caroline set her tea down, adjusted her glasses, and returned to her knitting. Outside, somewhere down the block, a dog barked. A door slammed. Tires peeled off the curb too fast. She wondered how long Dana would keep posting before the world got tired of listening. Her phone buzzed again. Then again. She didn't reach for it. Not until the screen went still. And then, one final ping. This time, she checked. Email from Thomas Reed. Subject, County Clerk entry. Message. Official filing entered. Judgment attached. Full control reconfirmed. A PDF icon glowed beneath it. She tapped once. Let it load. Then, with the wind rising outside and the last of her yarn gently unspooling into her lap, Caroline closed the email with a single nod. Across the room, the mail basket held a new envelope, already addressed, already sealed. Return address: Maricopa County Justice Court. The low rumble of diesel engines rolled through the quiet Phoenix cul-de-sac like a distant thunder warning. Two white moving trucks turned onto the street just after sunrise, clean, unassuming, and right on time. The lead driver checked his clipboard and backed into the driveway with calm authority, tires crunching over the gravel edge. Caroline stood at the end of the walkway in a crisp linen blouse and pressed slacks, a leather folder tucked neatly under one arm. Her sunglasses reflected the rising sun. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. The first crew member stepped out of the truck and glanced at her. "Hayes?" "That's me," she said. He nodded and headed to the back lift gate. Upstairs, a curtain twitched. Then the front door burst open. Eric stumbled out in flannel pajama pants and an old ASU t-shirt, hair still matted to one side. Hey, what the hell is this?" Behind him, Dana appeared, full panic already showing on her face despite the oversized sunglasses she'd thrown on in a rush. She clutched her phone like it was a lifeline. "Why are there trucks here? What is happening?" Caroline took one slow step forward and pulled the folder from under her arm. She opened it to the front page, the stamped court order, and held it up without speaking. A deputy sheriff, arms crossed and sunglasses on, stood beside her like a silent exclamation point. "This is private property," Eric barked. "You can't just roll in here and start—" "She can." The deputy cut in, voice steady. "Court-approved writ of restitution. You've been served. You were given notice." Dana looked from the deputy to Caroline like this was some elaborate prank. "You're seriously doing this?" Caroline didn't answer. The movers lowered the ramp and began rolling out boxes, clearly labeled in thick Sharpie. Hayes. Owner kitchen. Fragile master bedroom. Caroline Eric watched in stunned disbelief as one of the workers wheeled a dolly loaded with clear storage bins and a vacuum-sealed mattress cover past him. Dana shrieked. "Those boxes go upstairs. That's our bedroom." "They're going into her house," the deputy said. Ruth appeared behind Caroline, casually sipping a to-go cup from her bakery, phone raised in her other hand. "You're filming," Dana hissed. "Of course I am," Ruth said. "You film everything, don't you? Seems only fair." Eric stormed forward, but the second deputy stepped into his path. "Sir, step back. You interfere with the move and you'll be in violation of the court order." "Court order?" Eric repeated, voice cracking. "She's my mother." "She's the owner," the deputy replied. Dana spun toward Caroline. "This is insane. You're seriously putting us out on the street? You're doing this in front of the neighbors?" Caroline calmly pulled out the deed and held it up like it was a mirror. "In writing, in full, in public," she said. A car slowed as it passed the house, a neighbor in the passenger seat leaning slightly to get a better look. The moving truck beeped as the ramp lowered again, hydraulic hiss filling the awkward silence. Dana finally snapped. "I'm calling my lawyer," she said, jabbing at her phone. "Which one?" Ruth asked. "The one that filed the losing motion? Or the one that tried to get a restraining order and spelled her name wrong?" Dana turned away, furious. A pair of movers exited the house carrying a garment bag and a pair of designer shoes. They paused briefly at the steps, then continued down without a word. Eric looked like he'd been hit in the chest. "You planned this the whole time," he said, voice low. "You waited until we were invested." Caroline didn't answer him. She turned to the lead mover and pointed toward the back patio. "Everything marked with red tape stays. The rest can go inside." He nodded. Eric stared after her, stunned. "You're making a mistake." Caroline paused at the threshold, looking back at her son standing barefoot on concrete he no longer had a claim to. "No," she said softly. I made one 30 years ago. I'm fixing it now. Inside, the old grandfather clock ticked. Outside, another box hit the truck bed with a clean, hollow thunk. Dana's voice rose again. You can't do this. You don't get to erase us. Caroline stepped into the house, the door swinging shut behind her. From the porch, Ruth's camera caught the last line before it clicked closed. You erased yourselves. The ink smelled faintly metallic in the temperature-controlled air of Thomas Reed's office. His fountain pen hovered over a crisp page of cream stationery as he adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat, giving Caroline one final glance across the desk. Are you sure you want to make it this definitive? He asked. Caroline sat perfectly upright in a slate-gray linen blazer, the Arizona heat forgotten behind the thick paneled glass. Her purse rested at her feet. Her hands were folded in her lap. When she spoke, her voice didn't waver. I'm sure. Thomas gave a single nod and clicked the pen. Then let's make it permanent. The will lay flat between them now. Short, clear, legally binding. Thomas turned it toward her. I, Caroline Ruth Hayes, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby declare this document to be my last will and testament. Caroline read every line before signing, slowly, deliberately. In the bequest section, Eric Hayes's name was gone, erased cleanly, without apology. In its place were two beneficiaries, the Ruth Delgado Foundation for Community Baking Initiatives and the South Valley Women's Shelter of Maricopa County. The assets were spelled out in plain, careful language: the house, her retirement account, her stocks, her car. Even the vintage china set Dana had scoffed at. Every piece accounted for. Every intention etched in ink. Thomas watched her sign and dated it with quiet solemnity. You want to leave a copy at my office for safekeeping? He asked. Leave two, Caroline replied. One for my file, one for Ruth. A gentle knock on the office door followed. Ruth stepped in, wiping flour from her hands with a striped dish towel and carrying her ever-present to-go mug. I brought backup, she said with a grin. You're right on time, Thomas said, sliding the document toward her. You're listed as a witness. Read, then sign. Ruth scanned the document quickly, eyebrows raising slightly at the allocations, but she didn't comment, just signed in blue ink and handed the pen back like she was settling a bet. When she looked over at Caroline, there was something both proud and protective in her gaze. How does it feel? Caroline reached for her purse, placed the signed original inside, and stood. Like a stone lifted off my chest. Thomas smiled faintly. You've done more than just protect your future. You've designed it. Ruth linked her arm with Caroline's as they left the office, the automatic door clicking closed behind them. Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed downtown Phoenix in golden heat. Palm shadows stretched long across the sidewalk. The scent of citrus drifted faintly through the air from a nearby market stall. Caroline paused at the corner, exhaled. For the first time in months, maybe years, her breath came all the way out. No holding, no bracing, no waiting for someone to interrupt her peace. She turned her face up toward the sun and let it warm her skin. Ruth fished in her purse and pulled out her phone. Should I text Dana a picture of the new beneficiaries list? Caroline chuckled. She'd only post a 5-minute meltdown in response. True, Ruth said, pocketing the phone. Let her scream into the void. They walked in silence for a block. Cars passed, people bustled. But Caroline moved through it all like she was made of marble. Calm, sculpted, solid. At the next intersection, a city bus pulled up. On the side was an ad for the South Valley Shelter's Fall Gala. Ruth nudged her. Think they'll name a kitchen after you? Caroline smirked. They can have the whole damn dining room. Back at her car, she opened the driver's door and slid into the seat, setting her purse gently beside her. Her keyring jingled as she started the ignition. Her phone buzzed once. Voicemail. From Eric. She didn't listen. She deleted it. Then she checked her rearview mirror, backed out of the parking spot, and turned toward home. But before she pulled into traffic, she took one final glance at the will in her bag and smiled. The first voicemail came in just after sunrise. Caroline was kneeling in the front yard, soil under her nails, a gardening trowel in one hand and a nursery pot in the other. A small row of rose bushes sat beside her, still wrapped in burlap, yellow, blush, and deep crimson, ready to root. The phone buzzed from the porch, ignored. Then came the second call, then the third. She didn't answer any of them. Dana's voice finally cracked through as a voicemail preview across the locked screen. Caroline, please. You've made your point. We're out. You won. But this, what you're doing with the will, this is going too far. You're destroying Eric. Think about what this means for your legacy. For your family. Caroline stood slowly, wiping her hands on a faded dish towel tied at her waist. She picked up the phone, read the rest of the message, and hit delete without hesitation. Then she bent down and placed the first rose bush in its shallow hole. The check was delivered by hand, no stamp, no fuss. Caroline had driven herself to the bank, had the cashier's check issued, and then personally handed it to Ruth in a plain envelope over coffee and warm pecan scones. For the foundation, Caroline said. Ruth blinked at the number on the slip. You could have taken a European cruise. I don't need a cruise, Caroline replied. I need you to outlive their nonsense. Ruth snorted and raised her coffee cup. To justice. Caroline clinked her mug against it. To letting it rise. Later that week, the bakery cafe was buzzing. Extra staff, new signage, an entire corner remodeled with fresh cabinets and commercial-grade mixers. A brass plaque sat on the new counter. The Hayes Community Baking Wing, in honor of second chances. Ruth had tried to talk her out of the name, but Caroline had insisted. The irony was intentional. When the ribbon was cut, Ruth raised a glass of sparkling cider and pointed her fork at Caroline, who stood near the espresso machine, arms crossed but smiling slightly. To the woman who proved you can rise after being walked on. The crowd laughed, clapped, then bit into warm cherry pie. That night, Caroline sat on her front porch with her knitting in her lap and a cup of mint tea in hand. The roses she had planted lined the walkway now, their petals glowing gold and red under the porch light. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel like something she was defending. It felt like something she owned again, completely. She watched as a car she didn't recognize slowly passed by, headlights dimmed, then sped up again. She didn't care. Across the street, the neighbor's wind chime rang out against a soft breeze, and the night air carried a familiar scent. Creosote, and something sweeter. The roses. Her roses. A letter arrived the next morning. Handwritten, no return address, the paper folded unevenly. Caroline knew Dana's handwriting immediately. The letter opened with a clumsy apology. Then came the bargaining. Eric is a wreck. He's lost everything. He keeps saying you don't mean it, that you'll undo it, that you'll come to your senses. Please, Caroline, just leave something. Not for me. For him. For your name. Your legacy. Caroline refolded the letter, walked calmly to the kitchen trash can, and dropped it in. No pause. No second thought. Her legacy didn't live in a trust fund. It wasn't a surname on a mailbox. It was in the women baking bread at Ruth's new community oven. It was in the warm beds waiting at the South Valley shelter. It was in her roses, her keys, her deed, and her unlisted number. She opened the window and let in the warm desert air. It smelled like earth and fire and victory. That afternoon, Ruth stopped by with a peach cobbler still warm from the oven. They ate it straight from the dish with mismatched spoons, seated side by side on the porch swing. "Think they'll try again?" Ruth asked. "Maybe," Caroline said, "but they'll find the door locked." She glanced toward her mailbox, where a new brass nameplate had been screwed in the day before. Caroline R. Hayes, owner and occupant. She exhaled. Deep. Final. Across the street, a foreclosure notice had just gone up on another house. Caroline didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. The first whispers came through the cafe. A realtor's assistant mentioned it while ordering an oat milk latte. A contractor said something under his breath near the pastry case. By the time Ruth heard it from her delivery driver, "Hayes? Like the sun?" "Yeah," he filed. Chapter 13. Can't keep up with the legal fees. The news had already passed like dust through the valley. Caroline didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. Bankruptcy had a certain scent to it, sour and metallic, like panic steeped in paper. By Tuesday, Dana's Instagram was gone, not private. Gone. No more stories, no more hashtags, no more filtered photos of someone else's home labeled Mach Hours. She'd vanished. A neighbor said she was visiting her sister in Flagstaff. Another claimed she was spending time offline, processing. Caroline doubted either was true. She assumed Dana was exactly where she'd always been, just far enough away to avoid accountability. That morning, Caroline swept her kitchen floor in slow, steady strokes. Sunlight poured in through the clean glass windows, catching the soft swirl of flour dust from the peach cobbler Ruth had dropped off the night before. The tile was cool under her bare feet, and Billie Holiday crooned from the little Bluetooth speaker on the shelf above the stove. She hummed along, tuneless but content, her broom passing over the same worn groove in the tile where the fridge used to sit back when Eric was a teenager sneaking sodas before dinner. Ruth appeared just after 11, balancing a white bakery box in one hand and a bag of fresh oranges in the other. "This one's just for you," she said, setting the box on the counter. Inside was a tall layer cake, thick with cream cheese frosting and curls of candied lemon on top. "What's the occasion?" Caroline asked. Ruth shrugged. "You've survived 4 voicemail barrages and 3 fake lawyer letters this week. I figured that calls for frosting." Caroline grinned. "And citrus?" "Detox." They both laughed. Later, after Ruth had gone and the kitchen was quiet again, Caroline found the mail. Most of it was junk. Flyers, insurance solicitations, a coupon for gutters. But one envelope stood out, handwritten, cream-colored, from South Valley Women's Shelter. She opened it at the counter. Inside, a folded thank you letter on thick stationery, typed and signed in ink. "Because of your gift, 10 women and their children will sleep in clean beds this week. They'll eat real meals. They'll be safe. From all of us. Thank you, Caroline." A small drawing of a rose had been added at the bottom in pink crayon. She didn't cry. She just closed the letter gently, smoothed the creases, and pinned it to the fridge with a single magnet. Next to it, she placed a printed screenshot of Dana's deleted post. The one that had once read, "So grateful for our beautiful home." The contrast made her smile. That evening, Caroline sat on her porch with a slice of cake and a chilled glass of sun tea. The roses had taken to the soil, buds bloomed with reckless confidence now, and bees danced in and out like tiny, joyful trespassers. The wind picked up just after sunset, carrying the smell of citrus and the faint tang of dust. A delivery van rolled down the street and paused at the end of the cul-de-sac. A clipboard hung out the window, the driver squinting at a list. But they passed her house and kept going. Carolyn leaned back in her chair, fork paused halfway to her mouth. Across the street, the old Hayes mailbox had been replaced. The foreclosure sign was gone. but the lights hadn't been on in days. Eric's name had vanished from the HOA directory. He'd become a shadow, a rumor, a man so certain of his entitlement, he'd never imagined needing an exit plan. She took another bite of cake, soft, bright, tangy sweet. Inside, the stove timer dinged. She rose, placed the glass down, and stepped into her house. Her house. Just as a breeze swept across the porch and knocked the corner of the thank you letter slightly askew. She didn't straighten it. She let it flutter. She let it breathe. The dining room glowed with late afternoon warmth. Golden light slanting through the blinds and striping the polished table. No centerpiece, no blueprints, no paper plates. Just a lemon tart in the middle. Homemade, slightly imperfect, exactly right. Caroline moved quietly between the chairs, setting down dessert plates with small slices already waiting, forks angled neatly, napkins folded with care, real plates, china, the gold-rimmed set, the same ones they'd once laughed about not using for her. She used them now, not because they were valuable, but because she was. Across the table, Ruth poured coffee into thick ceramic mugs with hairline cracks near the base. "You know," she said, steam curling into her glasses. "This feels like a reset." Caroline smiled faintly. "A reroute, maybe. Same road, different driver." They clinked mugs. No toast, just the quiet satisfaction of earned peace. The meal had been simple. Roast chicken, buttered green beans, a bottle of chilled Chardonnay. Ruth had brought wrapped in a dish towel like it was holy. No extra guests, no announcements. Just two women who knew how to hold space. After dinner, Caroline slipped into the kitchen and returned with a card in her hand. Not an envelope, just the card. Thomas Reed's handwriting was neat, as always. Inked in blue, it read, "Caroline, I don't often thank clients for teaching me something, but you reminded me that power doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it just signs its name and waits. Warmly, T." Tucked inside had been a photo, the ribbon cutting at the shelter. 3 women holding scissors in front of a fresh painted wall, a banner above them reading, "The Hayes Fund, in honor of dignity and shelter." Ruth had already seen it, but she looked again now. "They didn't know what hit them," she murmured. Caroline sipped her coffee. "No, they still don't." Later that night, she stood alone by the window as the wind rose across the yard. The roses leaned, not bent, not broken, just swaying, resilient. She'd worn her softest cardigan, the one with the hole in the cuff and the loose button at the collar, the one Eric used to tease her for keeping. Let him. She pulled the sleeves over her wrists and walked to the mail basket near the front door. A small newsletter sat on top, folded twice, printed in black and white. She opened it. South Valley Shelter. Fall Update. In the corner, a note from the director. This season, the Hayes Fund helped provide warm beds, second chances, and, most importantly, dignity. We're grateful to the woman who turned pain into purpose. You know who you are. Caroline folded the newsletter and slid it gently beside her recipe book. Then she walked to the door. No one waited outside. No angry sons. No desperate pleas. No deliveries. Just the soft hush of desert twilight and the smell of creosote rising off the stone. She stepped out onto the porch, closed the door behind her, and locked it with her keys. The air wrapped around her shoulders like an old quilt. Across the street, the porch light on the foreclosed house flickered once, then died out. Somewhere in the distance, wind chimes rustled. Ruth called out from the living room, "You forgot the rest of the tart." Caroline smiled. "I didn't forget. I'm saving it." "For who?" She turned toward the door. "For whoever brings the next good news." She lingered a moment longer. Let the silence settle around her like something earned. No secondhand ownership, no signatures borrowed or begged. Just air. Hers. Clean. Final. Free. She stepped back inside, eased the door shut behind her, and turned the lock with a soft click. No one else would turn that key again. In the kitchen, she rinsed 2 mugs and placed them in the drying rack. She glanced once at the empty tart plate, the last buttery crumbs like a quiet exclamation mark. Then she wiped the counter, flicked off the light, and turned toward the hallway. As she passed the framed family photo on the wall, she didn't stop, didn't look, didn't carry it. She didn't have to, because they had given her a paper plate, but she gave them eviction papers with dessert.